From New York City, the epicenter of the pandemic, this is Democracy Now!
This is our land. We have jurisdiction. We have the authority to do this. And more importantly, it's for a real good cause. So why should we, consult about what? It's just kind of I feel something that, is really not needed at this time.
Standoff in South Dakota. The Cheyenne River Sioux and Oglala Sioux tribes erect checkpoints to protect against the coronavirus entering their communities, which they say are not equipped to handle an outbreak. The South Dakota governor orders them removed. The checkpoints are still up. We'll get an update from Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Chairman Harold Frazier. Then to Chicago, where COVID-19 took Black lives first. It didn't have to.
Whether it's diabetes, heart disease, upper respiratory illnesses, the kind of things that we've been talking about for a long time that plague Black Chicago, that lead to life expectancy gaps. This virus attacks those underlying conditions with a vengeance. 70 of Chicago's 100 first recorded victims were Black. We'll speak with Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Adriana Gallardo about the victims she documented, and we'll meet people she profiles in her ProPublica piece, Los New Yorkers, essential and underprotected in the pandemic's epicenter.
Yes, we need money, but there is also our health. If we contract coronavirus, this is serious because I have poor health, and so does my son. We're here trying to endure as much as we can. The situation is not easy with the expenses. The little we have, we spend on buying food, and we have family members who have gotten sick and friends who have died. We are trying to survive.
We'll also speak with Adriana Gallardo about the investigative series the ProPublica and Anchorage Daily News called Lawless, about sexual violence in Alaska, for which she and her team won the Pulitzer Prize. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The total confirmed number of coronavirus cases around the world is nearing 4.2 million, with over 286,000 known deaths. In the U.S., the number of confirmed infections is over 1.3 million, with over 80,000 reported deaths. Dr. Anthony Fauci is testifying today before a Senate panel, is expected to tell lawmakers opening up the country prematurely will lead to, quote, needless suffering and death. Fauci is appearing remotely after White House staffers recently tested positive for COVID-19. The chair of the Senate Health, Education, Labor and Pensions Committee, Senator Lamar Alexander, will also be remote after one of his staffers contracted the virus. As countries around the world move to reopen their economies, more surges in COVID-19 cases are being reported. In Germany, infections are on the rise as the country gradually comes out of lockdown. Meanwhile, France reported almost 4 times as many deaths Monday than the day before as it began reopening its economy this week. The World Health Organization's Director General warned countries against a hasty winding down of lockdowns Monday.
To protect lives and livelihoods, a slow, steady lifting of lockdowns is key to both stimulating economies while also keeping a vigilant eye on the virus so that control measures can be quickly implemented if an upswing in cases is identified.
In Russia, President Vladimir Putin announced Monday a phased relaxing of restrictions, even as the country is experiencing a surge in infections. Russia has over 232,000 cases, becoming the country with the second highest number of confirmed cases behind the United States. In other news from Russia, at least 5 coronavirus patients died at a St. Petersburg hospital today after a ventilator caught fire. This comes just days after a fire at a Moscow hospital killed 1 COVID patient. Back in Washington, D.C., President Trump clashed with Asian-American CBS reporter Weijia Jiang when she confronted him over the issue of testing.
Why is this a global competition to you if every day Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world, and maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty
question. Please go ahead.
Why does it matter?
Okay. Anybody else? Please go ahead in the back, please.
I have two questions.
No, it's okay.
But you pointed to me. I have two questions, Mr. President.
Next, please.
But you called on me.
I did, and you didn't respond, and now I'm calling on the young lady in the back, please.
I just wanted to let my colleague finish, but can I ask you
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
That second reporter addressing Trump was CNN's Caitlin Collins as Trump walked off the stage. Last month, Trump went after Chinese-American reporter Weijia Jiang after she questioned him about his failure to warn Americans about the virus in February as he held packed political rallies. He told her at the time to just relax and, quote, keep your voice down. Trump also falsely claimed at his Monday news briefing that anyone who wants to get a test can get one. Pressed by a reporter, Health and Human Services official Admiral Brett Giroir later clarified anybody who needs a test can get one, specifying this covered people with COVID-19 symptoms or who were knowingly exposed to the virus. At the briefing, Trump was standing in front of a banner that read, "America leads the world in testing." Meanwhile, the Washington Post reports a planned visit to a Pennsylvania factory producing personal protective equipment was scuttled last week after officials at the Braskem factory expressed concern for the health of its workers. Trump has refused to wear a face mask when out in public. Last week, he toured a Honeywell plant in Arizona without a mask, ignoring a sign ordering anyone inside to wear a facial covering. On Monday, the White House ordered all West Wing employees to wear masks unless at their desks, though the requirement does not extend to Trump or to Vice President Mike Pence. At the Rose Garden briefing, Trump did not wear a face mask. All the reporters did. The largest study to date on the use of hydroxychloroquine against the coronavirus has confirmed earlier research that the anti-malarial drug could cause serious heart problems and is not an effective treatment for COVID-19. Trump has repeatedly touted the drug. The latest study, published Monday in the Journal of the American Medical Association, looked at nearly 1,500 patients in New York and found that those on hydroxychloroquine had a similar death rate to those who did not take it, but were more than twice as likely to suffer a heart attack. Dr. William Schaffner, an infectious disease expert and advisor to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, said, quote, "The nail has virtually been put in the coffin of hydroxychloroquine." Unquote. On Monday, China warned it would take countermeasures in response to new visa rules imposed by the Department of Homeland Security, which will restrict entry for Chinese journalists to 90-day work visas. Previously, Chinese journalists were regularly granted open-ended visas to the United States. The United Food and Commercial Workers Union, the country's largest meatpacking workers union, is condemning the reopening of 14 meatpacking plants under a recent executive order by President Trump. The union's calling for CDC coronavirus safety guidelines to be made mandatory, as at least 30 meatpacking workers have died of COVID-19 and over 10,000 have been exposed or infected by the coronavirus. Many of the meatpacking workers are immigrants. India is moving to ease its nationwide lockdown despite still registering thousands of daily cases. Long-distance railway services are being restored today, which means many of the migrant workers who became stranded after India imposed its strict lockdown in March can finally go home. India has over 71,000 confirmed cases and over 2,300 reported deaths. In related news, a train killed at least 16 migrant workers in the western state of Maharashtra last week after it ran over a group of people sleeping on the tracks. The laborers were reportedly making their way home on foot. In Yemen, Aden was declared infested Monday by local authorities as coronavirus cases surge in the war-ravaged city. The UN confirmed the coronavirus has taken hold in Yemen, which is already reeling from widespread hunger and a crippled health system after years of the U.S.-backed Saudi bombing of Yemen. In East Africa, farmers continue to battle one of the worst locust invasions the region has seen in decades. Ethiopia, Kenya and Somalia are at risk of major food shortages as crops are destroyed while the coronavirus and its economic implications threaten to further compound food insecurity for millions. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization warns 500,000 people could succumb to AIDS-related illnesses in sub-Saharan Africa due to shortages in vaccines and essential medicines caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The disruption to local health services could see AIDS-related deaths reaching 2008 levels when it claimed nearly 1 million lives. Coronavirus lockdowns have been easing in some African nations, including Nigeria, the continent's most populous country. South Africa, which imposed strict measures and has recorded the highest number of cases, has permitted daily outdoor exercise and for restaurants to deliver food, though most of its other restrictions remain in place. A group of over 50 organizations sent a letter to presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden Monday, urging him to adopt a foreign policy that prioritizes diplomacy and multilateralism over militarism. The letter was also sent to President Trump. The effort was organized by Demand Progress, and backers include Greenpeace U.S., Our Revolution, Muslim Public Affairs Council, and the National Iranian American Council Action. The group is demanding Biden commit to a number of progressive foreign policy positions, including reducing the military budget, diplomatic engagement with Iran and North Korea, opposing non-democratic regime change, supporting Palestinian rights, and protecting the War Powers Act, which requires lawmakers to authorize military action. In related news, Joe Biden said last month that as president he would engage with Cuba, but that U.S. sanctions over its support for the government of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela could still remain in place. Joe Biden also recently expressed support for Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido and his, quote, efforts to restore democracy, unquote. Guaido has been trying to gain support for the ouster of Maduro since last year's unsuccessful coup attempt. In related news, Venezuela says it arrested 3 more mercenaries suspected of being involved in a failed coup against President Maduro and seized 3 abandoned Colombia combat vessels reportedly equipped with machine guns and ammunition. In Bolivia, anti-hunger protests broke out Monday in the city of Cochabamba. Injuries were reported among the protesters as police and military clamped down on the demonstrations. Protesters are calling out the lack of food assistance and other support from the government as people continue to lose their livelihoods due to the pandemic. Protests are also taking place against the unelected right-wing government of interim President Janine Áñez, who took power after the ouster last year of President Evo Morales. This comes after Áñez issued a decree imposing criminal charges on people who, quote, spread doubt among the population or disseminate false information, quote, online, in the latest move to restrict freedom of expression and silence media that are critical of her government. In Mexico, a 21-year-old Oaxacan environmental activist, Aogi Roy, was shot dead last week. The young biology student's friends, family, and other activists are calling for justice for Aogi. Local authorities say they're investigating the killing. Back in the United States, outrage is mounting in Indianapolis following a string of killings by police that took place last week in a span of less than 24 hours. On Wednesday night, 21-year-old Drayshawn Reed, a black man, was fatally shot by an officer following a car chase that was live-streamed on Facebook. The following day, 19-year-old African-American Mikhail Rose was shot and killed after what police described as a planned ambush against the officers. And in a third unrelated incident, that same day, a police officer killed 23-year-old Ashlyn Lisby, who was pregnant, by hitting her with his car as he drove to work. At a protest Saturday over Sean Reed's killing, police attempted to disperse crowds by deploying pepper balls and arrested at least one person. And in legal news, Supreme Court justices will hear arguments today in 3 highly anticipated cases involving President Trump's attempts to shield his tax returns and financial documents from lawmakers and a New York prosecutor. The public will also be able to listen to the live-streamed arguments as the Supreme Court continues to hear cases remotely amidst the coronavirus outbreak. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the Quarantine Report. I am Amy Goodman in New York City, the epicenter of the pandemic, with my co-host Juan Gonzalez joining us from his home in New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Good morning, Amy, and a good day to all of our viewers and listeners across the country and around the world.
Well, we begin today's show with the standoff in South Dakota, where two Native American Indian tribes are defying orders by South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem to remove COVID-19 checkpoints from their territories. The Cheyenne River Sioux and Oglala Sioux tribes say that checkpoints are the best way to protect against the coronavirus entering their communities, which are not equipped to handle an outbreak. The governor says the checkpoints, which are set up on highways on tribal land, are illegal. On Friday, she gave the tribes 48 hours to remove them and threaten legal action. Both the Cheyenne River Sioux and Oglala Sioux have refused, and the checkpoints are still running. In a Facebook Live video Saturday, Oglala Sioux Tribe President Julian Bearrunner and Governor Noem said that Governor Noem was threatening the sovereignty of the Oglala people.
South Dakota's Governor Kristi Noem threatened the sovereign interest of the Oglala people when she issued an ultimatum to us on May 8, 2020. Governor Noem miscalculates our level of dedication to protect our most vulnerable people from crony capitalism thrust to force us to open our economy as they chose to do so. There is no way to place a value on what we have to lose if we let them insult us this way. My relatives, we have been here for millions of years. Whatever they brought to our lands has proven to be poison.
17 South Dakota lawmakers signed a letter over the weekend urging the South Dakota governor to seek a resolution with the tribes. As of Monday, the state had not yet filed any lawsuit. South Dakota has a COVID-19 death toll of at least 34 and has had more than 3,600 confirmed cases. From where we go to Eagle Butte, South Dakota, to the reservation, where we're joined by Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Chairman Harold Frazier. Chairman, welcome to Democracy Now! Thank you so much for joining us. Can you explain what's happening now? How many checkpoints, COVID checkpoints, have you set up? And what are they for? What are you doing when the cars are stopped?
Yeah, good morning. Right now we have 9 checkpoints on our reservation. And, you know, one of the biggest concerns we have is safety. And we are looking, and as soon as we get more equipment, we intend to put up another checkpoint. You know, the main purpose of these checkpoints is to try to, you know, number one, keep the virus out, and number two is track if it comes in, because we always been saying that the virus does not travel. It's the people with virus that travel. So we know that that's the only way that that virus will get into our homes is if it's brought in from the outside, and that's the main purpose of these checkpoints, is to keep our people safe and also to ensure that they have the right to live.
Well, Chairman Frazier, what about the governor's perspective or viewpoint that these checkpoints are illegal? What's your response to that? Could you talk about the treaties, the existing treaties between your nation and the federal government that might have some bearing on this, or do have bearing on this?
Well, you know, we kind of look, you know, and number one, the people who elected me to this position, they're the ones that are, I guess, so-called my boss. The governor is not my boss, or the federal government. It's the people that live here. That's who I work for, and that's who's I take, you know, directives from and such. But they haven't. You know, we stepped up to do this. We feel that we have every right to do this. We have a treaty, the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, Article 16. In that article, it says that, you know, before any white man can travel or reside on our lands, they must get consent from the Indians first. In addition to our treaties, there's a case law, there's even a constitution that we swore to uphold against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that they give us all the legal right to do what we're doing. You know, a lot of time, you know, and we've been, you know, studying the laws of this country for quite a while. How can somebody own something without paying for it? And that's the way we look at it, that these lands, these roads, they are ours because we were never paid for it. So we have every legal right to do that. And it doesn't matter, you know, what comes today, tomorrow, we're still going to be here. We're still going to have and maintain our checkpoints.
Chairman Frazier, can you describe what happens at a checkpoint? And have you been at one? Talk about the people who are stopping the cars and what they're doing when they stop them.
Well, yeah, I've been there to all of our checkpoints numerous times. If a driver rolls up, and it all depends, if a driver rolls up and, they're asked some health questions. There's a questionnaire that they have to be filled out, and they're filled out by our deputies. So there's really no, I've seen some motorists where they just roll down their window part way and answer the questions. If they're coming in for essential travel, if they're a resident of the reservation or a member of the tribe or family to a resident or a member, they're asked the questions and they come in. If you're a motorist coming from a hotspot, your license plates show that. Every day we monitor that. Where are people? Where's the areas that we got to be concerned with? And if there are vehicles coming from that, then they will be asked to reroute their travel and not come through our lands. But we allow any commercial vehicles coming because, we need to have supplies just like everyone else. Medical people, they definitely are rolled in, but also too essential, and that's the postal service, the agriculture. That's a big thing on our reservation. So things like that, they're allowed to come and go, but they're all stopped and asked to fill out these questionnaires. And to expedite, there are a lot of locals, particularly the agriculture. They numerous times they come and go to. Sometimes they have land in other areas. So what we put together was a process to obtain a permit, an agriculture permit or essential travel permit, and them motorists usually just roll up, just show their permit number, and they're allowed just to keep going. I usually it just probably takes a minute to a minute and a half, and if you're not coming from a hotspot, you're generally just allowed to just roll on. So it's not really any, in my opinion, hindrance of any motorist. And again, the main purpose is to try to save lives. And I know there was that we should work together, and that's something that I agree with. But with our population, with our lack of medical facilities, things like that, we know, and we just look to our relatives to the south, the Navajo Nation, and see what's going on there, and that could easily be us. And we've been watching that, so that's why we stepped up to do these type of actions to try to keep our people safe and definitely save their lives.
And Chairman Frazier, you mentioned the lack of medical facilities. Could you talk about that? Because you issued a strict stay-at-home measures, while the governor of the state did not, of South Dakota did not. What is the situation? You only have 8 hospital beds and 1 ICU, as I understand it, in your on your lands.
Well, we have 8 hospital beds. We don't have no ICU. There are 6 ventilators. We have 1 respiratory therapist, and I'm being told by our medical people that generally they monitor 2 to 3 ventilators, and they could do 4, but that's pushing it. The nearest facility for critical care is in Rapid City, and it's about a 3-hour drive just to get to Rapid, and that has always been the practice of the Indian Health Service is to get the care that some of our people need. They generally get referred out. And but when we started this, we started looking at numbers and the number of residents. And when we broke it down, that maybe 50% would possibly get the virus. And when they were saying that 80% can be handled at home, and that left 20. And we looked at the numbers and we realized that there's a potential that we may need 1,200 beds. and when we only have 8, I mean, that really woke up a lot of people, here at home.
Chairman Frazier, can you talk about the one confirmed COVID case you've had on the reservation and how the checkpoint led you to be able to identify that person?
Yeah, that patient come in, I believe, like on a Thursday, and they knew where they come from. Our command center, which works directly with the checkpoints, they knew the patient come from an area that what we call a hotspot. Our medical people immediately start monitoring every day, being in contact and so forth. And then that following Tuesday is when the patient wasn't feeling well. They took her into the hospital. They ran a test and was tested positive. In a matter of less than probably 8 hours, I would say, because the very next morning they already knew the contact and of who they were, and then people were put into quarantine. And right now the patient's doing well, and we're pretty happy about that. But that's the whole purpose of that, because we if we didn't know any of that, and an individual come and they didn't realize they were infected by the virus, they could have easily went and immediately that could have went into a community spread, which is something that we know we're definitely not capable of handling.
And Chairman, the governor has threatened to take your tribe to court over the checkpoints, while other lawmakers have urged her to try to negotiate and reach a common agreement. Could you talk about the state's relationship to your tribe over the years?
Well, it just, as a matter of fact, I was just reading something last night. Rapid City, a lot of our members live out there from, us, Ogallala, Rosebud. A lot of our Sioux relatives live out there, and there's a IHS service unit out there. And they ran some tests, and there were 16 positive cases. And I was just reading that, and I was going to get some verification later today, but it sounded like one of the individuals that tested positive, the State Department of Health didn't even contact that individual till 3 days later. So we know the treatment we get from the state and the federal government, and that's why we're really doing these things, because we know when times get tough, all we have is each other.
I mean, this is a very significant situation.
It's important that we step up and.
You have Governor Noem, the South Dakota governor. I mean, when you look at the meat packers in Sioux Falls, for example, the mayor was begging the governor to shut down the plant. This is before Trump's executive order that said the state couldn't. You had hundreds and hundreds of workers, mainly overwhelmingly immigrants, who were testing positive. And yet the governor refused to do this. This is the same governor now that is saying she will challenge you, demanding you take down these checkpoints. So what are you willing to take this to, Chairman? Could this lead to a showdown, a standoff, not just legally, but between the state and your tribe?
Well, we have no other alternative. We won't back down. No matter what they do, whether it's through the court or they come by force, we will be still there because we live here. And we looked at everything. When we started planning and getting ready back in early March, that's some of the scenarios we threw out at our plans was for legal as well as medical. So I'm confident that if she wants to take us to court, go ahead and do it. And I believe in my heart that we're going to be successful. And the main reason why is we're doing these things for the right reasons. It's not to benefit economically, or we're not doing this to destroy somebody's business, their lives. I mean, we're doing it for the good, the good of God. And what we've been saying is, the number one, right is the right to live. I know that I've seen words being thrown out there about liberties and civil rights and First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, and so forth. But the right to live, I believe, is above all of them. And that's what we want to do, ensure that our residents here have that right to live.
And Chairman Frazier, you mentioned courts. Could you talk about the recent victory of the Cheyenne River Sioux over the Trump administration, where the Trump administration attempted to use some federal COVID-19 monies that were intended for the tribes to go instead to the Alaska Native corporations?
Yeah, we it was nothing against the Native villages, but we felt that a business corporation that's chartered under the state that is not federally recognized, we felt that they shouldn't get that because we believe that money was set aside for Native Americans. And the interesting thing, as of today, we still have not been notified how much we're going to receive here on Cheyenne River. I know a lot of our relatives in North Dakota and the other South Dakota tribes have received or been at least notified how much they're going to receive. But as of this morning, we have not been notified what we're going to receive. So we've been kind of thinking, well, I guess they pretty upset for us taking them to court. Maybe they're going to give it to us. But I guess hopefully by today we would know if we're going to receive any of that funding.
That's from the CARES Act. The tribes were demanding something like $20 billion. Ultimately was settled on $8 billion, but that's been very slow to make its way out to the various nations. Finally, Harold Frazier, very quickly, if you can talk about the significance of a legal battle here and what it could mean, for example, for the future of ongoing struggles like your fight against the Keystone XL pipeline.
Oh, yeah. I mean, most definitely. There's already been case law, the recent one in reference to roads and highways was in 1990. And I just can't think where they're coming from. And I, reading what the lawmakers, the state legislature put out there. I mean, and then even that the governor has been on briefings saying that, they have no jurisdiction. So, I mean, I'm just kind of totally shocked and almost unbelievable what's going on because, there's no way that they can win. There's just no way. And yet, and then too, we're trying to focus and stay prepared for this pandemic and just to have another issue is kind of unbelievable.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Harold Frazier, for joining us, Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Chairman, speaking to us from Eagle Butte in South Dakota from the reservation. When we come back, we go to Chicago, where COVID-19 took Black lives first. It didn't have to. And then we talk about Los New Yorkers, those New Yorkers who are undocumented at the center of the pandemic, who are essential yet underprotected. We'll speak with a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter with ProPublica. Stay with us. Adrian on Oglala Lakota in Sweetwater, Idaho, participating in the quarantine dance specials. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. As top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci prepares to remotely testify today before a Senate panel, opening up the country prematurely will lead to, quote, needless suffering and death. We look at how the pandemic has already taken a disproportionate toll on African-American cities like Chicago, where Black people account for 30% of the city's population, 72% of COVID-19 deaths. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot spoke to CBS News Face the Nation about the disparity.
This is an issue that's not unique to Chicago, unfortunately. We're seeing similar kinds of numbers reported across the country in large urban centers. And the answer that we believe is right is because of the underlying conditions that people of color, and particularly Black folks, suffer from, whether it's diabetes, heart disease, upper respiratory illnesses, the kind of things that we've been talking about for a long time that plague Black Chicago, that lead to life expectancy gaps. This virus attacks those underlying conditions with a vengeance.
That's the Chicago mayor. A new report by investigative news outlet ProPublica examined the first 100 recorded deaths in Chicago and found 70 of them were African-American. Reporters obtained a Cook County medical examiner's database that listed the names, health, and location information of COVID-19-related deaths and reached out to the families and friends of each person who died, ultimately focusing on 22 of the victims. For more, we're joined by the newly Pulitzer Prize-winning ProPublica engagement reporter Adriana Gallardo, part of a ProPublica and Anchorage Daily News team that just won the 2020 Pulitzer for the investigative report Lawless about sexual violence in Alaska. We hope to talk to her about that, as well as her piece on Los New Yorkers, essential and underprotected in the pandemic's epicenter. But first, the story that you did, Adriana, on Chicago. Congratulations on your Pulitzer. Talk about the significance of what you found in your hometown in Chicago.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Good morning. And like anything at ProPublica, it was a team effort on both this story and all of the other accolades. The story in Chicago that happens when you peel back all of the jargon and the numbers and the overrepresentation is one of losing the fabric of the city. And the 22 families that we were able to speak with, you really learn how much they loved Chicago, how much they did for the city. We're talking about veterans, teachers, nurses, everyday folks that are really the workers at the heart of what makes the city so great. And so in examining these first 70 deaths, we were able to understand how sophisticated structural racism exists in a place like Chicago, and how it's quick to sort of throw off the arrows and trying to understand how entrenched things are. And it is easy to just say, well, these folks just were sicker and worse off than other folks. And that's an inevitable consequence. And what we learned is that it looks very different when this is your lived experience.
And Adriana, specifically, what did you learn in terms of why there was such a disproportionate impact in the African-American community compared to the general white community?
Sure. There were three things that we learned from speaking to these families and looking at the data in Chicago. One was that the one-size-fits-all approach to COVID care doesn't necessarily work for everyone, especially those that are already facing other complications. And so many folks waited until their symptoms were very severe to seek care. That was, one thing that really gleaned. The second was, the thing that most Chicagoans know, which is the uneven distribution of hospitals throughout the city. Many of the folks who were among the first to die lived in neighborhoods that are served by less equipped hospitals, what they're called safety net hospitals, and particularly the South and West Side. They serve low-income populations with fewer resources, and many of the folks that became ill would either travel up 30 minutes, 40 minutes to the nearest hospital that they trusted, or they got so sick that by the time the paramedics arrived, they had to go to the nearest location, which was often a hospital that they didn't trust or that wasn't equipped to serve them. And then thirdly, the other heartbreaking thing is that the social connections that made their lives so strong, that made them integral to the beat of the city, really were then weaponized and were often a trace of how they became sick. So those three things were really stand out for us in this story.
And were there any particular impacts, for instance, of the kind of work that people did if they before the pandemic struck or during the pandemic? Because obviously, in terms of some of the Latino community, which, as I understand it now, already makes up the largest portion of any demographic in Illinois that has been struck by COVID-19, but many of them work in frontline situations. They're janitors and they work in restaurants or in hospitals as maintenance people. Were there any particular among the African American community employment situations that may have contributed to their contracting the virus and dying?
Yeah, of course. These are the city's frontline workers, right? The transit workers, the service industry workers. Many of those connections, of course, had lots to do with who died first in the pandemic.
Your specialty, Adriana, your love, your passion for journalism is around engagement and bringing out the voices of the people that you're covering. Can you tell us some of the stories, like Philman Williams, who was 70 years old and loved to travel and was in Mardi Gras in New Orleans?
Yes. Yeah. No. I mean, I think I'm very interested in understanding the in between the disparity that they long lived with and their sudden deaths. There's so much that happens in between and so many people that were a part of their lives. And that's something that doesn't always happen in obits and doesn't always happen in how we talk about these disparities.
Adriana, you just froze for a second. Oh, there. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, like any story that I think, especially in the ones that our newsroom covers, it's important to really understand what's at stake for those that are most affected by whatever issue we're talking about. And in learning from them as the experts of their own experience, we're able to really tell fuller stories that are actually representative of what's at stake and who's let who down in the equation. And in this case, it was a very fast-moving target. The pandemic was probably the only new factor in things that people already knew were happening in their lives and weren't necessarily had any control over.
So John Hill and Philman Williams?
Yes. John Hill was, a man that grew up in Cabrini Green, met his wife down the street at the Rock and Roll McDonald's, and Chicagoans will know exactly where we're talking about. Met his wife and built a family, started a small catering business, catered to many of the local politicians, and among his proudest accomplishments was cooking for the Obamas in 2008. Folks that can't get more Chicago than that, and Philman Williams' family, was proud of him. He was a doorman at Michigan Avenue and was very well loved by his colleagues, by the people in his building, had a long career in the service industry and in his neighborhood, in his community. And so for many of these families, this was a complete betrayal from the universe. They weren't expecting. John Hill was 53 years old and was out campaigning for a friend on Election Day last March in Chicago. And so for a lot of these families, when you call them and talk to them about COVID, they don't speak of it in the terms that we might write about it. They speak of it as a sudden and incredible loss to their families and to who they were.
We're going to break, Adriana, and when we come back, we want to talk about Los New Yorkers, talk about people in the epicenter of the pandemic. Who gets counted in their deaths? Who doesn't? What kind of support does the state give, especially for the undocumented? Adriana Gallardo, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter with ProPublica. Stay with us. Quarantine trio improvisation by Sunny Singh, Jonathan Goldberger, and Roheen Kamani. Friends playing together alone in their homes from Los Angeles to New York City. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York City with Juan Gonzalez in New Jersey. Here, New York City is the epicenter of the pandemic. We're turning now to meet some of the undocumented New Yorkers living through what is happening here. Their stories told in the new ProPublica report headlined Los New Yorkers, Essential and Underprotected in the Pandemic's Epicenter. This is Adan, a former kitchen worker who lives in the Bronx with his wife and two teen sons who are U.S. citizens. Adan says he worked at the World Trade Center 2 decades ago, where he lost so many of his friends September 11th. Not identified or acknowledged in the death toll because their names did not match those on record or their families were unable to claim the bodies.
Pero sí, va a pasar lo mismo que en las Torres Gemelas. Desgraciadamente va a ser lo mismo.
The same thing is going to happen as it did in the Twin Towers. A lot of people are going to end up in a mass grave. I don't remember how many Mexicans died, but we used to fill the elevators going all the way up to the restaurants, and there were a lot of Mexicans working there. A lot of people died, even though they said only a few. That's why most people who work in the restaurants now, and deliveries, the same thing is happening right now.
Well, for more on this story, we are still with the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Adriana Gallardo, engagement reporter at ProPublica, who worked on this story. She wrote this story with Ariel Goodman. In the interest of transparency, Ariel is my niece. Adriana, can you talk about the essential and underprotected New Yorkers that you met, that you profile? Start with Adan, who we just heard.
Yes, Adan is a perfect example of some of the workers that we met in this piece. They've been in the city for decades. They belong to the low-wage service industry. And in Adan's case, I was surprised when he had this flashback in the middle of our conversation to 9/11. And he was, as you heard, so certain that many of the people who were powering these buildings and delivering, all types of service, it's something, will also be forgotten in the shake of things and in the ways that undocumented deaths are happening in the city. And him, through Adan, he was sort of my Sherpa through this piece. We would talk every few days, and every few days he would have an update of people he knew who were dying, who were sick, and he himself and his wife and son had all three of them been ill with COVID and beat it at home. And so many folks like Adan who were both trying to save themselves and then help others like his brothers who were convinced they wouldn't get care if they went to seek it.
And Adriana, in listening to their stories, what were some of the biggest concerns that you have in terms of the undocumented community as it continues to face this pandemic without any kind of the kinds of governmental support, emergency payments from the federal government, extra unemployment insurance, all the other support that Congress and the president have been giving to the general population?
Yes, they, many of them failed multiple times by not just local government in things such as requesting burial assistance, which wasn't available to folks without a Social Security number until middle of last week. They were disappointed by their own embassies and their own consulates that were very slow to react to the hundreds of deaths that were piling up very quickly. And they were left, with some of the most difficult decisions, which were to either continue working and risk their the health of their entire families or themselves, or sit at home and sort of wait for this to pass while not having any sort of income, any sort of relief. And people like Adan, who said, his landlord kept coming, knocking on the door looking for rent, and him being unable to come up with next month's rent. And these are very proud folks who talked about how much they loved what they did and how proud they were to never miss a rent payment until things like this happened. And so I think for them it was a case of ultimate disappointment and ultimate isolation in a city that's already very difficult to navigate.
There's a meme that's going around. Instead of paying rent, we should just clap for landlords instead. If it's good enough for nurses, landlords should have no issue getting by on it. I wanted to turn to Berenice. She suffers from kidney problems. Her son struggles with asthma. She's been home for weeks, along with her husband, Luis, who before the pandemic worked at a cab company.
Así como que sí nos hace falta dinero.
Yes, we need money, but there is also our health. If we contract coronavirus, this is serious because I have poor health, and so does my son. We're here trying to endure as much as we can. The situation is not easy with the expenses. The little we have, we spend on buying food, and we have family members who have gotten sick and friends who have died. We are trying to survive.
And this is Sonia. She became ill with COVID-19 symptoms almost 3 weeks ago and was afraid to go to the hospital.
I'm afraid to go to the hospital because I have diabetes. I have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and hearing the news, I'm afraid. I did not want to go to the doctor, to tell you the truth. I prefer to isolate myself here at home. I only brought home remedies and drank a lot of hot tea. The situation itself has been very sad for me because I am here in my community, helping in whatever way I can. But I also know a lot of people, and I have seen that many of them have already died. Many people I know, and it's very sad to know that they arrive with symptoms at the hospital and they don't leave there alive. That was my fear. That's why I didn't want to go.
Sonia and Berenice are just two of the people you profiled, Adriana, in this very powerful piece, Los New Yorkers, as they talk about the number of people who've died. You pushed hard in this piece to find out about burial benefits. And can you talk about what came of that? There has just been a change. I mean, the Wall Street Journal reporting, sadly, they use the term illegal immigrants, the Wall Street Journal. They still use that term. But they talked about the burial benefits going up for New Yorkers from $900 to $1,700, including undocumented.
Yes, when we started writing this piece, and there's 2 deaths that we document in the piece. And one of them was an undocumented kitchen worker who worked in Times Square, and his family was fundraising, like many other families, to cover the burial cost and the cost of cremation, and in a pattern that just seemed, it was a sudden illness, maybe brief hospitalization. Many of these folks were in the trailers, the freezer trailers that lined the streets of New York, and then an incinerator. And for them, it was all of navigating all of that process was incredibly challenging. And then, of course, all of the cost implications. And just last week, May 5th, the city of New York changed regulations, and now before this, the person requesting burial assistance and the person who died both had to list a Social Security number on the application. That has since evaporated, and now all New Yorkers qualify for burial assistance. So that's where we're at. I did want to mention that about Bernice and Sonia. I met both of them through an organization here in New York that works with indigenous Mexicans, which make up a majority of the Mexican community in the city. La Red de Pueblos Transnacionales is who supports many of them. And so we're also talking about folks who are at even smaller, break into even smaller communities of vulnerabilities. For them, they come from very remote places in Mexico and in other countries in Central America, and they're facing unsurmountable challenges now in caring for their dead.
Now, Diana Gallardo, can you talk about the whole situation? There's been an estimated of 400 Mexican migrants who are known to have died of COVID-19 in the New York area. But for health reasons, the government of Mexico will only accept their bodies if they are cremated. Can you share any updates on this? What does this do in terms of the cultural traditions for for many Mexicans? And is there any change seen in terms of the Mexican government's position on the bodies being able to be returned back for burial in their homeland?
I believe there's been no change in that policy. And what this means is a tremendous disruption to tradition. Many of these folks, both who celebrate indigenous cultures and who practice Catholicism, really, their tradition is to bury the body, return it to the earth, have ceremonial rituals of that kind. And the cremation has really altered that notion of death and who keeps the ashes. For one of the families, the ashes are sitting at the funeral home until they're able to send them back. There's tons of flight restrictions. There's lots of other barriers to getting the bodies or the ashes back to their families. And that's been a tremendous obstacle for many of these families to just, the brothers that we profiled, they did everything together. They came to this country together, and now one brother is sitting in Queens figuring out how to send the ashes of the other to their mother in Mexico. So it's been tremendously difficult in ways that I think are hard for us to imagine.
Mayor de Blasio said in the last few weeks that when you had, for example, 300 people dying a day or 600 people, another 200 to 300 are dying a day who were not being counted. They were dying at home. So many of those people are immigrants afraid to go to the hospital. Is that what you found, Adriana? Absolutely. I mean, we heard things like families arguing amongst themselves in where some in the family would say, if we go to the hospital, we'll be the last seen. If we die there, we'll be the first to die. We'll be sectioned off according to social. I mean, part myth, part fear, part distrust in health systems. I mean, we're trying to undo a notion that's been long. Healthcare is a privilege in most places, and undocumented workers aren't the first to be receiving access to healthcare. So even as they were hearing very encouraging messages from the governor, and they were keeping up with the news, they didn't feel comfortable stepping into clinics. We also heard from many who lived within walking distance of hospitals, and they were, watching the chaos unfold outside their door, and became even more afraid of coming in at the peak of the crisis. And so, yes, we heard time and time again that they were just too afraid to go, and by the time they went, it was too late. And that was, that was no accident. And yes, many people, I think, more than we know, died at home. That's for certain.
And Adriana Gallardo, we only have a couple of minutes, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what drives you to cover these stories, some of your own experiences that have shaped your perspective of what the role of a journalist is in society. Yes. A lot of this work is absolutely personal, not just because of, the two cities that we just discussed are places that I care lots about. And I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, lived in Chicago for many, many years. I'm a Mexican woman. I came as an immigrant at 5 years old, worked in a janitorial family. And really, I think I see a lot of my family, and a lot of the people that we talk to for our stories are people that I can relate to. And I'm lucky to work in a team that really values the perspectives of the working, and the perspectives of journalists who maybe aren't from the traditional backgrounds that we see in newsrooms. And yes, a lot of this work are things that I care to understand in deeper levels, and be able to really, like we said at the top of our segment, really value who gets remembered and how, and why. What can we do as journalists to really do a bit more to give these folks a nod for everything that they do? We want to thank you so much for being with us. We want to ask you to stay with us for a quick post-show to talk about your gorgeous piece, The Lucky Ones, about your own life, and also about the Alaska story for which you just won with a team of people the Pulitzer Prize. Adriana Gallardo, engagement reporter at ProPublica, part of a collaboration with the Anchorage Daily News that just won the prize. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Thanks so much for joining us.